Hi, today we're going to read chapters 3 and 4 in Stanley and the Magic Lamp by Jeff Brown. Okay, so here is the genie, Prince Haraz, and there's Stanley, and there's his brother, who's a little bit chicken here. Okay, this is Arthur hiding under the bed. So we know that Stanley gets lots of wishes. Okay, so let's see what happens. He wished for a liaphant, which is a lion and an elephant. He asked for the asket basket, but let's look at the new stuff. Chapter 3. In the park, here's the liaphant eating. Everyone slept late and enjoyed a large breakfast, particularly the liaphant, who ate 2 more pounds of hamburger, 5 bananas, and 3 loaves of bread. Then, since all the lamb chops enjoyed tennis, they set out with their rackets for the courts in the big park close by. Aware that his genie clothes would puzzle people, Prince Haraz borrowed slacks and a shirt from Stanley and came along. Slacks here means pants, comfortable pants, not jeans, okay? In the street, they met Ralph Jones, an old college friend of Mr. Lambchop's, whom they had not seen for quite some time. Nice running into you, George, and you too, Mrs. Lambchop, said Mr. Jones. Hello, Arthur. Hello, Stanley. Aren't you the one who was flat? Rounded out nicely, I see. You always did have a fine memory, Ralph, Mr. Lambchop said. Let me introduce our house guest, Prince Haraz. He is a foreign student, here to study our ways. How do you do, said the genie. I am Fawzi Mustafa Aslan Mirza Melek Namerd Haraz. How do you do, Mr. Jones says. Well, I must be off. Goodbye, Lambchops. Nice to have met you, Prince Fawzi Mustafa Aslan Mirza Malik Namerd Haraz. He does have a wonderful memory, Mrs. Lambchop said as Mr. Jones walked away. So anyways, this I must be off. I must be off means I must leave. I must leave, okay? They set out for the park again. How it would surprise Mr. Jones to learn that Prince Haraz is a genie, Mrs. Lambchop remarked. The whole world would be amazed. Gracious, we'd all be famous, I'm sure. I was famous once when I was flat, Stanley said. I didn't like it after a while. I remember, said Mrs. Lambchop. Nevertheless, I wish I knew myself what being famous feels like. She wishes. Prince Haraz looked at Stanley in a questioning way, and Stanley gave a little nod. The genie smiled and nodded back. They were just passing the famous Museum of Art, one of the city's most important buildings. A tour bus filled with visitors from foreign countries had stopped before the museum, and a guide was lecturing the passengers through a megaphone. Over where those trees are, that's our great city park, he announced. Here on the right is the famous Museum of Art, full of great paintings and statues and... Oh, what a surprise! We're in luck today, folks. That's Mrs. George Lambchop coming right toward us. Harriet Lambchop herself in person. Right there with the tennis racket. She's famous. Prince Haraz made her famous. The tourists cried out in pleased astonishment, turning in their seats to stare where the guide was pointing. What? He means you, Harriet, said Mr. Lambchop. I think so, said Mrs. Lambchop. Oh my goodness, they're coming. The tourists were rushing from the bus. A Japanese family reached Mrs. Lambchop first, all with cameras. Please, Lambchop lady, said the husband, bowing politely. Honor to take picture, yes? Of course, said Mrs. Lambchop. I hope you are enjoying our country. But why my picture? I'm not... No. Famous. Famous Lambchop lady, cried the Japanese family, taking pictures as fast as they can. As fast as they could. Mrs. Lambchop understood suddenly that her wish had been granted. Thank you, Prince Haraz, she said. What fun! She posed graciously for all the tourists and signed dozens of autographs. In the park, she was recognized again and had to do more posing and signing. It was now mid-morning, and all the park's tennis courts were occupied. But the Lamb Chops' disappointment lessened when they saw a crowd gathered by one court and learned that Tom McRood, the world's best tennis player, was about to lecture and demonstrate his strokes. He's hitting the ball. Okay, this is the world's best tennis player. Tom McRood was known for his terrible temper and bad manners. But the Lamb Chops were eager to see him nevertheless. With Prince Haraz, they squeezed close to the court, next to the TV news cameras covering the event. None of you can ever be a great tennis player like me, Tom McRood was saying, but at least you can have the thrill of seeing me. He's like, I'm the best. You guys, you'll be happy to watch me. A little old lady in the crowd gave a tiny sneeze, and he glared at her. What's the matter with you, Granny? The old lady burst into tears, and friends led her away. What a mean fellow, Prince Haraz whispered to Stanley. I can't stand old sneezing people, said Tom McRood. Okay, now I'll show you how I hit my great forehand. First, hold it, Tom, called the TV news director. We've just spotted Harriet Lambchop here. What a break! Maybe she'll say a few words for our cameras. Even Tom McRood was impressed. The Harriet Lambchop? Wow! Swing those cameras this way, fellows. The director ran over to Mrs. Lambchop, holding out a microphone. Wonderful to see you, he said. Everybody wants to know your views. Favorite color? What about the foreign situation? Do you sleep in pajamas or a nightgown? Isn't that rather personal? Asked Mr. Lambchop. George, please. Mrs. Lambchop spoke into the microphone. Thank you all for your kind welcome, she said. I would just like to say that I'm glad my fans are having such a lovely day in this delightful park. The crowd cheered and waved, and Mrs. Lambchop waved back and blew kisses. She's like a movie star. Jealous of the attention she was getting, Tom McRood whacked the tennis ball over the fence behind him. Noticing, Mrs. Lambchop spoke again into the microphone. And now, let us give this great champion our attention. Yeah, growled Tom McRood. When the TV cameras had swung back to him, he went on. I need a volunteer so that I can demonstrate how terrible most players are compared to me. Mr. Lambchop thought it would be thrilling to share a tennis court, with a champion. Signaling with his racket, he stepped forward. Tom McRood handed him some balls. Okay, try a serve. Mr. Lambchop prepared to serve. He's going to hit the ball, hit the tennis ball. He's got his feet wrong, Tom McRood shouted, and his grip is wrong. Everything is wrong. This made Mr. Lambchop so nervous that he served 2 balls into the net instead of over it. Terrible, terrible. Watch how I do it, said Tom McRood, running to the far side of the court. From there, he served 5 balls, so hard and fast that Mr. Lambchop missed the first 4 entirely. The 5th one knocked the racket out of his hand. So here. Yeah, and there is Mr. Tom McRood, who's not nice. Ha ha! Laughed Tom McRood. Now let's see you run. He began hitting whizzing forehands and backhands at sharp angles across the court, making Mr. Lambchop look foolish as he raced back and forth, getting very red in the face and missing practically every shot. The other Lambchops grew angry, as did Prince Haraz. This need not continue, you know, he whispered to Stanley. Just then, Mr. Lambchop came skidding to a halt before them, banging his knee with his racket as he missed yet another of the champion's powerful shots. He's losing badly. Ha ha! This is how I give lessons, shouted Tom McRood. Mr. Lambchop looked at Stanley, then at Prince Haraz. Okay, Stanley said, and the genie smiled a little smile. Thank you, said Mr. Lambchop. Returning to the court, he called out to the crowd, "Ladies and gentlemen, I will try my serve again." Across the net, Tom McRood gave a nasty laugh and slashed his big racket through the air. Mr. Lambchop served a ball, not into the net this time, but fast as a bullet, right where it was supposed to go. Tom McRood's mouth fell open as the ball whizzed past him. "Out!" he shouted. "That ball was out!" Voices rose from the crowd. "Shame on you! The ball was in! What a liar!" "In! In!" Tom McRood shook his fist. "I'll bet you can't do that again." Mr. Lambchop served 3 more balls, each even faster than the first one, and as perfectly placed. Tom McRood could not even touch them, though the last one bounced up into his nose. Then Mr. Lambchop rallied with him, gliding swiftly about the court and returning every shot with ease. With powerful forehands, he made Tom McRood run from corner to corner with little drop shots. He drew the champion up to the net, then lobbed high shots to send him racing back again. He's an expert now. Nobody has ever played such great tennis as Mr. Lambchop played that day. Tom McRood was soon too tired and too angry to continue. He threw down his racket and jumped on it. "You're just lucky," he yelled. "Besides, I have a cold." And the sun was in my eyes the whole time. Pushing his way through the crowd, he ran out of the park. There was tremendous cheering for Mr. Lambchop, who just smiled modestly and waved his racket in a friendly way. Then he came over to where the other Lambchops and Prince Haraz were standing with the TV news director. "You're really good," the director said. Frankly, you looked terrible when you first went out there." "It takes me a little while to get warmed up," Mr. Lambchop said, and led his family away. Leaving the park, Mrs. Lambchop signed many more autographs, and a reporter from Famous Faces magazine was waiting to interview her at home. "You'll be on the cover of our next issue," said the reporter. "How much do you weigh? Will there be a movie about your life? Who gave you your first kiss?" "None of your business," said Mr. Lambchop, and the reporter went away. They watched the evening news on television, hoping Mr. Lambchop's tennis would be shown, but only Mrs. Lambchop appeared, with Tom McRood in the background. "The celebrated Harriet Lambchop was in the park today," said the newscaster, after which came a close-up of Mrs. Lambchop saying, "I'm glad my fans are having such a lovely day." And that was that. No tennis playing on the TV. Dinner was interrupted several times by phone calls for Mrs. Lambchop from newspaper and television people. The calls bothered Mr. Lambchop, but not the Liaphant, who ate 4 pork chops, a jar of peanut butter, a quart of potato salad, and the rubber mat from under his dish. So now he's eating things, not food. Okay. Mighty Man. Okay, this is chapter 4. Okay. The brothers fly. Great. I think there's going to be some bad guys soon. "I'm not complaining," said Arthur, complaining, "but it's not fair. Some people have Liaphants or get famous. I want to be president or as strong as Mighty Man, but all I got was 1 minute with an asket basket we can't even use anymore." It was after dinner, and the brothers were in their bedroom with Prince Haraz all in pajamas. "It's not my fault, Arthur." The genie looked hurt. "I just follow orders." "Rub, I appear. Wish, I grant. That's it." Stanley felt sorry for his brother. "I don't think you should be president, Arthur," he said, "but I'll wish for you to be the strongest man in the world." "I wish it, Prince Haraz." "Oh, good," said Arthur. He waited, but nothing happened. Darn, it didn't work. Disappointed, he punched his left hand with his right fist. Ow! Jumping up and down, Arthur flapped his hand to relieve the pain. When you're the strongest man in the world, said Prince Raz, you have to be careful what you hit. And there's Arthur. But I still feel like me, Arthur said. Testing himself, he took hold of the big desk with one hand and lifted it easily above his head. Stanley's mouth flew open. And so did the desk drawers. Here, they're open. Pencils, marbles, and paper clips rained down onto the floor. Oops, said Arthur. This is ridiculous, said Prince Raz, helping him tidy up. The strongest man in the world in a bedroom, picking up desks. Out having adventures. That's where you should be. We can now, Arthur said. It's almost bedtime. Stanley had an idea. There'd be time if we could fly. Can't we all fly somewhere? I've always been able to, said the genie. For you two, it'll take wishing. I wish, shouted Stanley. Flying, Arthur and me both. For a moment, the brothers held their breath, expecting to be swept up into the air. Then Arthur tried small, flapping movements with his elbows. Oh, Collybot, said the genie. Not like that. Just think of flying and where you want to go. It worked. Stanley and Arthur found themselves suddenly a few feet off the floor, face down and quite comfortable. And however they wished to go, up or down, forward or back, was how they went. It was like swimming in soft, invisible water, but without the effort of swimming. Prince Raz gave advice as the brothers glided happily about the room. Point your toes. Heads up. Good, very good. Yes, I think you're ready now. He opened a window and leaned out. This breeze may be coolish. Higher up, we'd better wear something extra. Oh, there they are, flying through the sky. There's Prince Raz. You'll see. Stanley and Arthur put on bathrobes and gloves, and the genie chose a red parka and a dragon-face ski mask. Then he said, away we go! And the brothers floated through the window after him, out into the night. Up, up, up they went, leveling off now and then to practice speeding, but mostly rising steadily higher. Stanley and Arthur flew side by side, gaining confidence from each other, and the genie kept an eye on them from behind. It was a beautiful night. The sky above them was full of stars. Below them, the lights of the city twinkled as brightly as the stars. The brothers' white bathrobes and the genie's red parka shone in the moonlight. Sounds like fun. They flew above the big park where an orchestra was giving a concert. Music floated up to them, the clear, sweet tones of flutes and violins and trumpets, the deep, strong notes of cymbals and drums. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, I'm enjoying this, Prince Raz called through the dragon mask, so different from inside that lamp. The three flyers joined hands and circled the blaze of light from where the orchestra sat. It was like ice skating to music at a rink, but much more fun. In the distance, the wing lights of a big airplane blinked across the sky. Let's chase it, Stanley shouted. Prince Raz laughed. Go on, I'll catch up. Whoosh, whoosh. Holding their arms by their sides, Stanley and Arthur flashed like rockets across the sky, their bathrobes flapping like the sails of a boat. The big airplane was fast, but the brothers were faster. Catching up, they flew around and around it, looking through the windows at the passengers, reading and eating from tiny trays. Arthur saw a little girl with a comic book. Zooming close to her window, he stretched his neck, trying to read over her shoulder. The little girl looked up and saw him. Being mean, she held the comic book down where he couldn't see it and stuck out her tongue. Arthur stuck his tongue out at her, and the little girl scowled and pulled a curtain across her window. On the other side of the plane, Stanley saw a very tired-looking couple with a crying baby across their laps, keeping them awake. Flying up next to the window so that the baby could see him, he made a funny face, puffing his lips and wrinkling his nose. The baby smiled, and Stanley put his thumbs in his ears and wiggled his fingers. The baby smiled again and went to sleep. Stanley flew back around the plane, past the cockpit. Here's the cockpit. Okay, the pilots are in the cockpit. To join Arthur on the other side. There were 2 pilots in the cockpit, and one saw Stanley fly by. Turning his head, he now saw both brothers hovering above a wingtip, waiting for Prince Haraz to catch up. "Guess what I see out there, Bert," he said. "The stars in the sky, Tom? And below us the mighty ocean?" replied the other pilot. "No," said Tom. 2 kids in bathrobes." "Ah ha ha, what a joker," said Bert. But he turned to look. Only Prince Haraz could be seen now above the wing, his parka flapping as he looked around for Stanley and Arthur, who were hiding from behind the plane. "So what do you see, Bert?" asked Tom, keeping his own eyes straight ahead. 2 kids in a bathrobes, right?" "Wrong," said Bert quietly. "I see a guy in ski clothes and a dragon face." The pilots stared at each other and out at the wing again, but the genie had flown to join the brothers behind the plane. "Nobody there," said Tom. "Let's never mention this to anyone, Bert, okay?" "Good idea," said Bert. "Definitely." They flew on and had nothing more to say. So they said, "Let's never mention this." It means let's not talk about this. Let's not tell other people. Because if they tell other people, everyone will be like, they're crazy. So they don't want to talk to anybody about it. A giant ocean liner. This is a huge ship, okay? A big boat. Ablaze with lights, made its way across the sea below. "Come on!" Arthur shouted, whizzing away with Stanley behind him. Again, Prince Haraz laughed and let them go. The beauty of the great ship made the brothers marvel as they drew near. It was like an enormous birthday cake, each deck a layer, sparkling with the brightness of 1,000 candles. "Look, Stanley!" Arthur cried. "They're having a party on the main deck." A party on the main deck. I don't think that looks like a party. They flew closer to enjoy the fun and saw then that it was not a party, but a robbery. The main deck was crowded because robbers had lined up all the passengers and were taking their money and jewelry. The helicopter in which the robbers had arrived was parked close by, below the captain's bridge. The captain and his fellow officers had struggled, but they were chained up now on the bridge. "We've got to do something, Stanley," Arthur said. Zooming down to the bridge, he shouted over the railing at the robbers below, "Stop, you crooks! Give back all that money and jewelry and stuff!" Using his great strength, Arthur tore away the ropes and chains that bound the ship's officers. It was as if he were just tearing paper. He's so strong, just rips the chains. Amazed, the robbers stumbled backwards, dropping money and jewelry all over the deck. "Oh, Lordy," one robber yelled. "Who are you?" Remembering his favorite comic book hero, Arthur could not resist showing off. He flew 10 feet up in the air and stayed there, looking fierce. "I am Mighty Arthur," he shouted in a deep voice. "Mighty Arthur, enemy of crime." Exclamations rose from the robbers, and passengers and ship officers. "So strong, and a flyer, too! Who expected Mighty Arthur? Are we ever lucky? This ought to be on TV." Now Stanley swooped down from the sky with his bathrobe belt untied, so that his robe flared behind him like a cape. "I'm Mighty Stanley," he called, "defender of the innocent." "I do that too," Arthur cried, wishing he had made his robe a cape. "We both do good things, but I'm the really strong one." They're kind of having fun here. He saw suddenly that several robbers were trying to escape in the helicopter. It was already rising, but Arthur flashed through the air until he was directly above it, and with one hand pushed it back down onto the deck, the ship's deck, okay, the top of the ship. When the frightened robbers jumped out, the ship's officers grabbed them and tied them up. Now the passengers were even more amazed. "Did you see that?" they said. "And mighty Arthur and mighty Stanley both on the same day. And this is better than TV." The brothers flew up to join Prince Haraz, who had been circling over the ship. "What a pair of show-offs," said the genie. "Even worse than I used to be." As they set out for home, the cheers of the grateful passengers and crew floated up behind them. "Hooray for our rescuers," they heard, "and especially mighty Arthur." And a moment later, "Mighty Stanley too, of course." Dun, da, 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 da. Heroes. Here's Prince Haraz in the dragon mask. Soon the big ship was no more than an outline of tiny lights in the Black Sea below, and the last cheer was only a whisper above the rushing of the wind. "Three cheers for the enemy of crime and the defender of the innocent." The wind is making it more and more quiet. The brothers felt very proud, but it had been a tiring adventure, and they were not sorry when the city came into sight. Okay, they're going to fly back home. Now, what happens at the end? Are there any more bad guys? Is there bad things that can happen with a wish? Can they fix all the problems? We'll see. Stanley and the Magic Lamp, the end of the book, next video. Bye-bye.